we're gonna talk now about the loan system because obviously those players that had mentioned before were products of the of obviously academies and uh, they'd been on loans and they managed to secure themselves permanent moves at a championship club. But there, I suppose there are a lot of pros and cons, and I'm gonna get you to kick us off in this conversation because I know it's something that we've I think over the years spoke about quite a lot. Um, tell me a bit about loan systems and yeah, like what
I,
when I use that phrase, what comes to mind for you?
um, the what comes to mind is loads of players that it's benefited, man. And I think like if you go back in the day, most top players have had even at least maybe if it's only one, and even if it was only half a season, they've had a significant loan that's impacted their careers that have showed other clubs that they can play at that level. So and it was good experience for them being in the men's game instead of playing reserve football like back in the day, all this under 23s nonsense that they play now. And I think it's brilliant, man. And it makes careers. It gives opportunities to these players to actually establish like professional careers because I know all these guys are in the academy. You know, they've got professional footballer from I don't know, insert a club in their bio. They've not kicked a football. They've not played a minute of professional football. So even though they've got that in their bios, they're not professionals until you've played the games to be professional footballers. So the loan system allows these guys to do that. And if you can go through all of the clubs, you can go back in the day. You know, you can talk about players like I don't know, I'm going far back, but like Beckham went to Preston for on loan, or you've got Frank Lampard went to Bournemouth, Jermaine Defoe went Bournemouth, um, and you can go through. There's loads of other players. They've had successful loan spells. I think Jack Wilshere was at Bolton for a little bit,
Yeah,
and there's loads of players.
he was with Daniel Sturridge as well, wasn't he? So they had that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't remember
yeah,
if it was the
the
same
same
year,
time.
but they both
Yeah,
they both really excelled under Owen Coyle.
yeah, and you got players like I think Lukaku done well at West Brom. You've got there's loads of players over the years, man, that's benefited, and Mason Mount done well at Derby, Tomori as well, Harry
Yeah,
Wilson, and sometimes the loans tell you two things. It tells you whether what level them players are meant to play at. In terms of like Harry Wilson, he stayed at that level. You know, his the next few clubs he played for was also in the Championship. But it's for me, it's much better education and experience for these players than playing under 23s football because I think I just don't see the benefits of that at all. And I think eventually in the next maybe few seasons, that's going to need a revamp, in my opinion. But yeah, that's my early thoughts on it.
I've got a question for you then. Um,
Yeah.
just off the back of that. So I know some conversations I've had, people think that especially some of the bigger clubs, and not just in England but around Europe, they're inflated with all the best youngsters. You know, they poach a lot of the best people. I know obviously now you can't sign players from abroad, but it still happens in the country. But the argument that often comes up when I have this conversation is it's better for the youngsters to go to an academy that's got the I say it very loosely, but the best facilities, the best coaches, and then go on loans because that will better their career rather than go to a club that let's say is a little bit less in stature and they work their way through, they make their debut quite young. I'm thinking of um, for example, like I don't know, Dele Alli. I don't know his history of academies, but obviously he broke through at MK Dons when he was quite young, and then got the move to Spurs. There's a couple of the whole guys as well that they've sort of broken into the first team, and so I'm always conflicted with whether it works better when a player plays for a lesser known club, works his way up, makes his debut and gets a move, or actually starts at a Premier League or a top level club, top level academy, so to speak, goes on loan and then secures a move. And I wasn't sure what your thoughts were around that, or what your preference is, or I don't know if it's a bit of both.
Do you know what? I think it's more of a fairy tale one if they can, do the Deli Alley thing. There's some players that have done that, but Dean Ashton was at Crew. Then he got to Norwich, then he gets to West Ham or whatever. So there's football's littered with those type of examples, or it's even littered with guys coming from non-league and ending up in professional football as well.
Mm,
That's starting to happen more nowadays because obviously the standard of non-league is getting better as well. But when you look at like which one's better, I don't think there's an answer for that. I think however you arrive to the highest point of your career, I think that's what that matters really. I don't think it matters whether you do it that route or you go to a club because you got to look at it in a different way as well. If you're a parent and you've got a son or a daughter, obviously with women's football as well, if you've got opportunity for them to be at a Chelsea academy or say Wimbledon's academy, you're going to take them to Chelsea because Chelsea's in the Premier League. Chelsea's one of the best teams in Europe, and they've also got one of the best. Because the other thing you got to look at, it's about the academy systems as well. So you got to look at
mm,
it like you got when you're talking about academy football, it's education. It's your football and education. So it's like you saying to me, it's like me saying to you, would you rather send if you had a child, would you send them to Kingston University? Would you send them to Oxford? Do you know what I mean? Because it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up with an Oxford level job, but it's a better education. And I think that's the difference as well when you're talking about some of these clubs. If they can get to a Chelsea or Arsenal, City,
mm,
United, or even abroad, you can get into a Barcelona's academy or Bayern Munich's academy. The level of your education is going to be a lot better. So, not to say that, like obviously we've seen the Deli Allis and other players like that. We've seen it with Ivan Tony. He come through Northampton or whatever. Like so, there are players that do that and still get to the top. But if you can get a better footballing education, then I'd see that as the route to go down. Because it doesn't mean you're going to end up a Chelsea player, but you're going to end up with a better education because you're playing against better players. You're playing with better players, better coaching, and yeah, I'd if you can say one or the other, you'd go down that route definitely.
mm. No, it's fair. I'm undecided. I can't. I'm still trying to work out in my head. Even going to Kingston Uni versus Oxford because I'm thinking about the experience and the graft.
No, come on,
Later
don't
on.
be silly. Don't be silly. Do not
I
be
don't know.
silly.
No, I've
No,
been
you
to
do know.
neither
You do
uni.
know. No, but you do know.
All right.
Let's not
Okay.
be.
I'll put
Yeah.
it this way. I'll put it this way.
Use
Right.
it. That analogy was just one, but in that
Uh,
analogy, if your kids you're sending them to Oxford, you are like let's not
but
like
I want.
that's
Yeah.
a
I wonder. I mean. I get out the university and um. I do wonder coming back to football. I suppose that where I'm on the fence with this is game time, right? And actually playing. So yeah, you get a better education. You can get some loan moves. You've obviously got. I think it's more the facilities. I actually think that there are a lot of really amazing academy coaches up and down the league. But I do. I suppose I have a question mark about game time. Not that lots of players need to play lots when they're young, but we've got players, and it's a tricky one. But you've got players that aren't really playing games at all. Like they go on a loan here, a loan there. They've been on about 4 or 5 loans. They're not really playing in one system consistently. But then that the contradiction to that is someone like a Ruben Loftus Cheek, and I think of that and I think, well, he's gone on a lot of loans. He's obviously very talented. He's come through, the Chelsea system, and now he's in the Chelsea team. Is he still in his mid 20s? He's still super young, and I'm thinking, I wonder if that is the best route then. And it's a
I
patience
think
thing where we shouldn't be thinking, oh, by 22 they should be playing. And I don't know
exactly.
that's, but
No, but
you're
I agree though.
yeah.
I agree because look, and there's two different ones you could look at. You could say look at Phil Foden, who Pep consistently said he's not going out on loan, and it's better for him to be here. Yeah, and everyone was screaming, "Oh, he needs to go out on loan. He needs the minutes. He needs this. He needs that." But in reality, Pep done it his way, and that way worked with that player. Yeah, but
Mm,
then
mm,
other players have really left City to go and chase their careers. But then if you look at, I know, and look, we do have to talk about Chelsea because they get slagged off for it, yeah. And there's loads of banter over the years about their, the loan group chat and all that other type of stuff, 40 man out on loan and all that. But the grand reality of it is, yeah, is that when it's all said and done, and if you look at over the last 10 years, they've produced the most players. They've produced the most professional footballers. If you compared
mm,
them to the other Premier League teams, they've produced the most professional footballers. Maybe not they've all ended up at Chelsea, because, like Theo used to say to us, they're not. That's not their level, but that's
Mm.
also okay because that's what the loan system will also tell you. It'll tell you that okay, you're good enough for the Championship, you're good enough for League One. Maybe that's your level. You're a Premier League player because you've now gone out on loan and done it in the Prem. So now Premier League teams want you. So even if you look at last season as one example of Brozier, Brozier's gone out on loan, done the business at Southampton. Now West Ham want him. Other teams want him
Mm.
in the Premier League now because they've seen it for themselves that he
Yeah.
can play at this level. So I think Loftus Cheek is another one. Conor Gallagher is another one. He done well at West Brom, then he done even better at Palace. So and then if they didn't go out on loan, they would have just been sitting in the under 23s doing nothing, you know. So and I know that's where the argument comes in of that should they have just moved to another academy, but then you don't know what their trajectory would have been had they went to another academy. Because it's like it's, even if you look at it in a different way, it's better to fail at the top. Because if you fail at the top, then there's ways you can go on the way down. Whereas if you
Mm.
took a risk and you ended up at say, I'm gonna leave Chelsea, I'm gonna go to Wimbledon, and you fell there, you're just gonna end up in non-league. So and there's nothing wrong with non-league. There's loads of very good technical non-league players. But I'm
Yeah.
saying it's better to start there, and if it doesn't work there, you might have to fall down a little bit. But yeah, I think that's where it works. But one of the things I say personally is that what you just said, the thing about the loan system that sometimes goes wrong is the amount of sometimes players go out on loan and it doesn't work at certain clubs, and that's where the problem comes. And you think like maybe some of them players just need to find a permanent solution. But my only gripe with the loan system, and I think this would be much better if this is laid out in the Premier League and across Europe. You will remember the time years ago. This is like 2003, 2004 season,
Mm.
yeah, when Real Madrid loaned Morientes to Monaco, and he was allowed to play against them in the Champions League, and he scored against them and knocked them out. Yeah. Now,
Mm.
obviously, it was controversial at the time, but that's the rule I want to see in place in the Premier League because and in the Championship and all these other all the way down the Football League because if you're allowed to loan players in the same league that you play in, they should be allowed to play against you because that gives teams unfair advantage, in my opinion. Because if you're a team that loans a lot of players out and they're all playing in the Premier League, and then they're those teams one of their best players at the time, they're
Yeah.
suddenly out
Yeah.
the team when they play you.
Yeah. It
You've got an
weakens.
advantage.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
weakens their team. So I think that's the only change I would make to the loan system that they should be allowed to play against you.
I'm gonna.
And then
I'm gonna.
that will also
No, go
go
on.
on.
Go on. And I'll ask you. I'll ask you in a minute.
No, no, no. Yeah, I'll finish. Go on.
Just on the back of that, then. And this is not necessarily my view, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What about a blanket rule that you can't then loan um, players to other teams in your division in the Premier League only?
No, I don't agree with that because it will reduce the quality and it will reduce them. And for the boys that have to go through that or girls that have to go through that, it hampens their careers because that means other professional clubs can't see what they can do at that level. So, like
Mm.
using Brozier or Gallagher as an example again, if Chelsea sold Gallagher or Brozier on a permanent deal, they can sell them to Premier League clubs because they've seen what they can do in the Premier League.
Mm.
Whereas if they couldn't do that, they would have to send them to different countries, maybe Bundesliga or maybe Eredivisie, Serie A, or they
Why
would
would
have
that
to
be a
send
bad
them
thing?
because it's not a bad thing,
Yeah.
but then they can't they can't showcase their skills in the Premier League and show that they can play in that league.
I understand. I'm playing devil's advocate here. This
Yeah,
isn't but how is that different to when a Premier League player buys a player, a Premier League club buys a player from another league?
it's not different, but I mean, you're say like the clubs that are loaning out the players, yeah,
Yeah.
they never if they're loaning some of these players and it's just for them to get experience and they're definitely in their plans. They need to see that they can do it in the Premier League as well. Or if it's Barcelona, they need to see that they can do it in La Liga, for example. You
Mm.
loaning the players to the Premier League if you're playing in La Liga, you don't know if they can play in La Liga. So if it's more of a better example could be someone like Mason Mount, yeah, he
Mm.
was in Chelsea's plans And obviously it didn't really work out that way because Lampard just put him in the team anyway.
Mm,
But if he had a loan, say in the Premier League, they would know, okay, cool, he could do it in the Premier League. We can trust him. We don't need to buy a player in that position because
mm.
we've got him. So I think, yeah, I think that wouldn't do well, and I think that would reduce the amount of players that actually get to professional football if that was the case.
Yeah,
Because
no,
it's like the
I
Jed
understand.
Spence situation. If Jed Spence wasn't getting in the Middlesbrough team, if he didn't get that loan to Nottingham Forest, we wouldn't have seen what he could have done this season. And now
No, I
he's on
appreciate
the
it. It would
verge
it
of
would
a.
it would just be it would just be for the prem because I realize how much of an issue that would be lower down, and it would just from a financial point of view. My the only reason that came to my mind was because I was thinking you could loan abroad, you could loan a division down because that's what was the case with Tamori and Mount for one of better examples. And if my thinking was in I'm going to say in the old days now because obviously we're old, isn't it? But in those times, if a player they thought a player was good enough, they'd they'd filter them in. And I do wonder if that rule came in. I don't know for sure, and it probably will never come in. But if he had to sell a player also, so let's say Conor Gallagher, Chelsea think they're not good enough for us, but good enough for the Premier, and they then have to sell him and put in a buyback clause, for example, and he goes to Crystal Palace. Wouldn't that be better for the Premier League in general? Wouldn't that allow other teams to catch up? Because it feels like it's a little bit unfair. The biggest 6 or 7 teams can loan players to everyone else, but they can never have those players and therefore never sell them on. But I
No,
don't
I
know.
would say no because also the thing you have to look at, yeah, is loaning in your league also is a shop window. It lets clubs know what them players can do, yeah? And also, clubs lower down the league can't take the same amount of financial risk as the top teams can. So,
Mm,
like say like using Gallagher as an example, if Chelsea said, okay, you can buy him right now for 40 million at the start of the season, Palace might not want have wanted to have taken that risk on Gallagher because they don't know what he could do at that point being last summer. Now they know what it can do. They'll play the 40 million tomorrow if they could. Does that make sense? So it's
yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah. I
And when you
understand.
said about older football, the difference back then, as I said, was under 23s and reserve football, yeah? Under
Mm,
23s football didn't have a cap on the amount of professionals that could play in that match. So if you was 18,
no.
say like back in the day, yeah, you was a 17, 18 year old coming through at, I don't know, Spurs, yeah? You could have played against Man United's reserve team, yeah? You could have been playing against Van Nistelrooy coming back from injury. You could have been playing against Roy Keane
Yeah,
coming from injury. Scholes, any of these guys, do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Rio off his ban coming back into the team. You could have been playing against all these guys. Whereas now, because there's a cap on the amount of professionals that can play in under 23s football, that's why for me it doesn't work because these
yeah,
guys are not getting tested. But if you're a centre back and then, oh, Haaland needs minutes, now you got to play against Haaland. That's a severe test in reserve
yeah,
football, whereas
yeah,
they're not getting pushed like that anymore, you know? And that's why you need to loan more players out now because you can't have that under 23. I don't know, innit? Some people might agree
No, no,
with
no.
under
It's
23s football.
it's a good point. It is a good
But
point.
I think it's a waste of time. I think it's a joke. So
Yeah,
it just depends on how you look at it. But yeah, I look at loaning within your league as a shop window. And it also allows the clubs to try before you buy, you know? And
yeah,
yeah, that's just my thoughts on it, really, man. But yeah, the only massive rule change I'd like is that they can play against their parent clubs. I think that would
yeah.
make it way more entertaining and it would make it way more interesting and
I
removes
agree
that
with you
unfair advantage.
that the only issue I'd have with that is you've got I don't know Harvey Elliott on loan to Bournemouth. I mean obviously it's not going to happen, but last day of the season Liverpool need to win by 1 goal to clinch the league. I'm not questioning the player's integrity, but you just I wouldn't ever want. I feel that would be such a weird situation to be in. Do you know what I mean? Even if I'm
It
not saying
wouldn't
any
happen.
player wouldn't try harder, but
Yeah, it wouldn't happen.
yeah,
Because that's what I'm saying. That's why I used Morientes as an example. That was a Champions League quarter final against his parent club, against Real Madrid, and he
mm,
scored in both legs. I think it was both legs. Definitely scored in one of them. And Coutinho did it recently against Barcelona when he's at Bayern Munich. He scored against them too. And that's a
yeah.
big game.
Yeah,
So I
the top
think,
players there. I'm just wondering
yeah,
about
there's
all of Phil
integrity there.
Neville's
They
own
would.
goals against United when he was at Everton,
No,
especially when they're
I
two
don't
0
believe
down.
that. No, I
I'm
don't
just
believe
stating
that.
facts.
That
I'm just stating facts.
No, no, but I don't believe.
No,
I'm
no, no.
giving
I'm just
players
kidding.
the benefit of the doubt. I'm
Yeah,
going with the integrity side of things. I don't see that being a problem, man.
yeah, yeah. No,
Because they're the
that's
games
fair
that
enough.
they're the games that you need to show that you can do it the most.